So I listen to music a lot. It's a part of my life. It's a ritual every single day. And I've also been making some music recently. So I wanted to share with you 5 albums that I think changed my life, changed my perspective in some way. I'm gonna jump straight in with number 1, and it's gonna make a few of you feel a bit weird, but that's okay. Just, you know, embrace it. Number 1 is Reanimation by Linkin Park. See, now, okay, like, I'm 24, so when I was a teenager, Linkin Park and other new metal bands were totally cool. Hybrid Theory was actually the first rock album I ever bought, and yeah, and I enjoyed it. It was innovative, it was interesting, it was new, and it spoke to teenage Bing. Made me feel badass, I wanted to move around. It was cool sounding music. The problem with Hybrid Theory is that I don't think it has much of a shelf life with an adult, because the lyrics were written by a teenage girl. That's not to say that there's not some poetry and truth to them, but for the most part, they're so unsubtle that it hurts. I am feeling bad. Let me tell you how I feel. But then in the wake of the success of that first album, Mike Shinoda and his gang of hip-hop friends in New York made a remix album. And it's so good! Regardless of how you feel about the band, Reanimation is a really competent hybrid hip-hop album. And more importantly to me, it was one of the first instances in my life I can point to and say, yeah, hip-hop might be a thing. I grew up in a time and in a crowd where rock was like the only thing that you could listen to. So for an album to sneak under the lines like that and introduce me to hip-hop was a life-changing thing. Number 2 is an album called Infinity Land by Biffy Clyro. Biffy got really, really big in the last few years, but their first 3 albums sound drastically different. And Infinity Land is my favorite. I think it is the best by a big margin. I was introduced to a few singles from the album by my friend Josh Seldis, and they blew my mind. And I bought a copy of the album in a tiny record shop in Hitchin when I was traveling with my parents. It was like a shift occurred. I had no idea music could do that. Surreal lyrics, lopsided song structures, screaming and falsetto and guitars and some of the most interesting drumming you'll find. It was completely new to me. And I knew that I would be listening to it for the rest of my life. Number 3 is The Shape of Punk to Come by Refused. Actually, its full title is The Shape of Punk to Come, a chimerical bombination in 12 bursts. But I'll, you know, use the short version. This is one of the most influential albums of all time. Underlined, bold, italic. It falls into the category of hardcore punk, similar to a lot of the stuff that was coming out of the DC hardcore movement in the 90s. Its title, The Shape of Punk to Come, became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Bands like Glassjaw, Finch, Lost Prophets, Funeral for a Friend, they owe a huge amount of what they sound like to this record. Fight Star, In Me, Fall Out Boy, Paramore, Panic at the Disco. If you're a fan of Paramore, that's fine, whatever. But you have to know that they are like an imitation of an imitation of an imitation of Refused. If you want to get to the real meat, you want to drill all the way to the core, listen to The Shape of Punk to Come. Number 4 is a lot more recent. It's an album called Because the Internet by Childish Gambino, whose real name is Donald Glover. I could write an essay about this album. Donald Glover is the closest thing to an idol I will ever have. And I've listened to his music since he first started making music, when it, you know, wasn't very good. For a long time, for me, he was the poster child for doing it yourself. If Donald Glover could make cool music pretty much on his own, and it sounded like that, then why couldn't I? With Because the Internet, it shifted. And he and his collaborators became true innovators of experimental hip-hop. It's an album that could only be made right now. Although, like any good artist, they are informed by what has come before, they strive to be different. It's ultra-modern musical collage, solos spliced in from nowhere, start-stop, beats dropped to speaking segments, and the content of the lyrics is a confident mix between the personal and the worldly, a commentary on the modern world. Its title really makes sense. It's music that could only exist in the internet age. It could only be made because of the internet. And number 5, if I may, is an album called Progress by Hi-Fi Spaceship. In February this year, I set about making a proper album and taking music production, something that I really enjoy, a little bit more seriously for a change. And it was released this week. Making it has been one of the most formative experiences of my life to this point. From the technical, I learned a new audio program, Reason, from scratch. To the social, I worked with an amazing team of talented musicians, Jack, Corinna, Elliot, and they all have different ways of working. Their processes influenced my process, and I learned to adapt the way that I work to accommodate such a variety of different collaborators. To the business, I wanted to learn everything about releasing an album, not just the art side of things. I've learned about collections agencies like PPL, licenses with MCPS, royalties, and artist contracts. I've tried my best to build a successful and sustainable business model around this project. And the personal. I've learned a lot about myself and what I enjoy doing. I have touched the face of insanity, screaming at my computer screen in the middle of the night, losing recordings, not getting something quite the way I want it to sound. And all of this has changed me in ways that are probably so huge, I don't know the half of it. At this point, you probably know where this is going. I made an album and I'm proud of it, and I would love you to buy it and listen to it. Progress, the collaborative album by Hi-Fi Spaceship, featuring Daniel Dobbs, Jack Shaw, Jenny Bingham, Steve Bingham, Corinna Jane, Carlos Montero, and Elliot Morris, is available digitally worldwide on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Digital, and direct from us at hitwithwrench.com. You can also pre-order physical copies of the album on CD, exclusive 2CD edition which comes with bonus stuff, or vinyl, which will be shipping in the new year, but you get the digital download immediately. If you haven't heard any Hi-Fi Spaceship, we have a Soundcloud, which I will link below as well, and it's my hope that maybe just for a few of you, Progress will make it onto your list.